The day my daughter-in-law stood at my wife's graveside and whispered, "Don't expect anything, old man." She left it all to us. I didn't argue. I just nodded, folded my hands in front of me, and watched the dirt fall onto the casket of the woman who had been the love of my life for 31 years. I had buried my wife. I wasn't about to start a fight at her funeral. But I knew something she didn't. Something my son didn't either. And I was willing to wait as long as I needed to for the truth to come out. My name is George Whitmore. I'm 63 years old. I spent the better part of 4 decades building custom furniture by hand out of a workshop behind my house in Asheville, North Carolina. Not the kind of furniture you buy at a big box store, the kind people wait 18 months for. The kind that ends up in estate sales 60 years later and still sells for more than it costs new. I never got famous. I never had a television show or a magazine spread. I just worked. Every morning at 5:30, I was in that shop with my coffee, and I didn't come in for dinner until my wife Barbara knocked on the workshop door and told me the food was getting cold. Barbara and I met when we were both 22. She was waitressing at a diner in Hendersonville while she figured out what she wanted to do with her life. I was delivering lumber. I asked her out 3 times before she said yes. She told me later she made me wait on purpose, just to see if I was serious. I was. I asked her to marry me 8 months after that first date, on a Tuesday, in the parking lot of a grocery store, because I'd just bought the ring and I couldn't wait another hour. She laughed so hard she dropped her bags. We didn't have much money in the beginning. I was working out of a rented space, building furniture on commission, barely covering the bills. Barbara worked part-time at an insurance office while our son Travis was young. When Travis started school, she started taking some bookkeeping courses. She had a head for numbers in a way I never did. Eventually, she started handling the business side of things for us. Invoicing, taxes, payroll, when I hired my first assistant. It worked. We were a team. I built things with my hands. She made sure the business stayed alive. Over the years, the business grew. I developed a reputation for a particular style of hand-jointed hardwood furniture that had a waiting list. We moved the operation from the rented space to a proper facility. We hired 6 craftsmen. We had accounts with designers and architects up and down the East Coast. By the time Travis graduated high school, Whitmore & Co. was making real money. Not Silicon Valley money. Craftsman money. Honest money. The kind you earn 1 piece at a time. Travis grew up watching all of it. The problem was what he chose to see. He watched his mother handle the books, answer the phones, manage the client relationships, invoice the designers. And somewhere along the way, I don't know exactly when, he started to believe that she was the one who had built the business, that I was just the guy in the back with sawdust on his boots. That without her, there would have been nothing to run. I don't think Barbara ever corrected him. Not the way she should have. Not clearly, not directly. Maybe she didn't realize how deep that belief went. Maybe she liked being seen as capable. She was capable, enormously so, and she let the impression stand a little longer than it should have. I'm not saying she meant harm. Barbara was not a malicious woman, but she let a version of our story take root in our son's mind that wasn't true, and she let it grow there for 20 years without pulling it up. I should have said something, I know that. But the truth is, it didn't matter much to me at the time. I knew what I had built. Barbara knew. The craftsman who'd worked with me for decades knew. I didn't need Travis to understand it. He was my son. I loved him. And I kept thinking there'd be time to set the record straight. There wasn't. About 6 years ago, Travis married a woman named Pamela. She came from money. Her family had a commercial real estate operation in Charlotte, and she had a way of looking at people that made you feel like she was calculating exactly what you were worth to her. I tried to like her. I really did. Barbara liked her well enough, at least in the beginning, but Pamela had a talent for sorting people into categories. and I could tell almost from the start which category she'd put me in. Useless. That was her category for me. The quiet old man with sawdust on his hands, married to the woman who had built the business. After they got married, Travis and Pamela started spending more time with us, particularly with Barbara. They'd come for dinner, and the conversation would be all about the business. What were the numbers looking like? Had Barbara thought about expanding into the luxury hotel market? What was her plan for the next 5 years? I'd sit at the end of the table and eat my pot roast and listen to them talk to my wife about the business I had built with my own hands, and I would say nothing. Barbara would glance at me sometimes. I don't know what she was thinking in those moments. I'd like to believe she felt the weight of what was happening. I'd like to believe she wanted to say something and didn't know how. She got sick 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The kind that doesn't give you a lot of time to make peace with things. She was diagnosed in February and gone by October. In those 8 months, we talked. Really talked the way you do when you know the clock is running. She told me things she'd never said out loud. She told me she was sorry for letting Travis believe what he believed. She told me she had never felt right about it, but that somewhere between the business growing and Travis getting older and Pamela coming into the picture, she had lost the moment to correct it. She told me she was going to fix it. I didn't know what she meant by that. I figured she meant she was going to have a conversation with Travis before she died. I hoped she would. But the weeks went by and the treatments took everything she had, and I could see that she was using all her strength just to stay present in the time we had left. I didn't push her on it. I just sat with her. She died on a Thursday in October, with her hand in mine and Travis and Pamela in the hallway. She had asked for a moment, alone with me at the end. Travis was not happy about that. At the funeral, I stayed close to her sister, my old friend Ray, and a few of the craftsmen who'd been with me since the early days. Travis and Pamela worked the room like they were hosting an event. I watched them accept condolences, thank people for coming, guide guests to the reception tables. It was efficient. That was the word for it. It was when the last guests were leaving, when the folding chairs were being stacked and the flower arrangements were being loaded into a car, that Pamela came to stand next to me by the grave. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She looked at the headstone and said, "We've already spoken to Martin Graves." Martin Graves was Barbara's attorney. He's reading the will next Friday. I think it's best we all go in with realistic expectations. I looked at her. Barbara built that business, George. Everyone knows that. Travis is her son. Whatever she had, the business, the accounts, the property, it goes to him. You'll be taken care of. We're not heartless. But I just want you to understand that before Friday, so there aren't any ugly surprises. I looked at my wife's grave. Then I looked back at Pamela. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. She nodded, satisfied, and walked back toward Travis. I stood there alone for another 10 minutes. The autumn light was doing something beautiful on the hills behind the cemetery, turning the maples orange and gold the way they do in western North Carolina in October. Barbara had loved this time of year. I drove home. I went into the workshop. I ran my hand along the surface of a cherry dining table I'd been working on before she got sick. The grain was so tight and even that it felt almost like cloth under my fingers. I thought about what Pamela had said. I thought about how certain she was. I was not certain about anything at that moment, but I was not afraid. 2 days after the funeral, I got a phone call from Martin Graves's office. Not Martin himself, but his paralegal, a young woman who was very polite and very specific. She said that Martin needed to speak with me before the will reading. She asked if I still had the original incorporation documents for Whitmore & Co., dated back to 1987. She asked if I had the original design patents I'd filed in the early 90s on 3 joint techniques that had become foundational to how the company built its furniture. I said yes. She said Martin would like to see them. I went to the filing cabinet in my office, the one Barbara had always called the archive, the one Travis and Pamela had probably never thought twice about. And I pulled the folders, the incorporation papers, the patent applications. The original business plan I had typed out on a rented typewriter in 1986, sitting at the kitchen table of our first apartment. The letters from the first designers who had commissioned work from me. All of it. 37 years of paper in manila folders. I brought them to Martin's office on a Wednesday morning. Martin Graves was a quiet man in his late 60s, the kind of attorney who's been in a small city long enough to know where all the bodies are buried and has no interest in drama. He looked at the documents for a long time, then he looked at me. Barbara was very specific, he said. He didn't say anything else that day. He just thanked me, made copies of everything, and told me he'd see me Friday. I didn't sleep well Thursday night. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I lay in the bed that Barbara and I had shared for 28 years, in the house I had built the money to pay for with my own hands, and I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember who I was. I knew who I was. That was not the problem. The problem was that I couldn't see how Friday was going to go. I had no idea what Barbara had written. I had no idea what she had told Martin. I just knew she had said she was going to fix it, and I had believed her. That was all I had. On Friday morning, I put on my good jacket, the one I'd worn to Travis's wedding, which still fit, because I'd never stopped working with my hands, and a man who works doesn't tend to let himself go. And I drove to Martin's office on Lexington Avenue. Travis and Pamela were already there when I arrived. Travis was wearing a dark suit. Pamela had on a silk blouse and a look that said she had already decided how this was going to go. Travis barely glanced at me when I came in. That was nothing new. Since Pamela had come into his life, he'd developed a way of looking past me, like I was a piece of furniture in a waiting room. The irony of that never escaped me. Martin came in, closed the door, set a folder on the desk, and began. He read the standard language first, the portions about personal property, about Barbara's jewelry going to her sister, about certain sentimental items going to specific people. Travis sat very still. Pamela sat beside him with her hands folded, very composed. Then Martin said, "With regard to Whitmore & Co., its assets, accounts, real property, intellectual property, and all equity therein." Travis leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Martin continued, "It is my wish that full and complete ownership of Whitmore & Co., including all assets, accounts, properties, and interests, be transferred to my husband, George Whitmore, the company's founder and the source of everything it became. It is my wish that Travis receive $1, a symbolic acknowledgement that I see him, I love him, and I am asking him to understand." The room was very quiet. Pamela's composure cracked, not all at once, but in a slow, precise way, like a windshield hit by a stone. The stillness left her face first, then the color. Travis turned to look at me. It was the first time in years that he had really looked at me. Not through me, not past me. Martin kept reading. There was a letter. Barbara had written a letter, and Martin read it aloud, and I want to try to do justice to what she said, because she found words in that letter that I'm not sure I could have found myself. She wrote that she had spent 31 years married to a man who built things, not just furniture, but a life. She wrote that she had made a mistake she was ashamed of, which was letting her son grow up believing that she had built the company, when the truth was that she had been a partner in it, an essential one, a beloved one, but that the company existed because of George's vision and George's hands, and George's refusal to stop working even when it was hard. She wrote that she had been proud of what she contributed, and she had been wrong to let that pride become a lie by omission. She wrote that she was correcting that now, not to punish Travis, but because she could not leave the world with the lie still standing. She wrote that she loved him, that she had always loved him, that she had always loved him, that she hoped he would use this moment not as a wound, but as a door. Martin set the letter down. Travis said nothing for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Quieter. He asked Martin if there was any provision for appeal. Martin said that the estate documents were clear. and had been prepared with full legal capacity, witnessed and notarized 9 months prior. Pamela stood up. She said several things, some of them loudly. Martin was very calm. He said she was welcome to consult her own attorney, but that the document was not ambiguous. She left the room. Travis stayed. He stayed for a long time after Martin excused himself to give us a moment. We sat in that office, my son and I, in the kind of silence that is weight. Outside, I could hear Lexington Avenue. A delivery truck. Someone's radio. Ordinary Friday morning sounds. Travis put his elbows on his knees. He was still looking at the floor when he said, "How long did you know?" "About what she'd written." "I didn't. She told me she was going to fix it. I didn't know how." He was quiet again. "I called you a—" He stopped. He'd said something at the funeral under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear. He'd called me a kept man. He'd said it to one of Pamela's cousins. I had heard. "You don't have to say it," I told him. "I need to." "Okay. I called you a kept man at Mom's funeral. I said you'd ridden her coattails your whole life." I let that sit in the room for a moment. "I know what I built, Travis. I always knew. That's not the same as forgiving it, but it's why I didn't fall apart when you said it." He looked up. His eyes were red. He was 51 years old in that moment, and also somehow about 12. And I felt the distance between us not as anger but as grief. All those years of him not seeing me, all those dinners where he'd talked to his mother about her business. All the ways Pamela had sorted me into the useless category and he had let her. "Did she ever tell you?" he asked. "Before she got sick. She apologized to me in those last months. But she never explained it to me either. I think she didn't fully understand it herself." He nodded slowly. "The patents," he said, "were those always yours?" "Always. Filed them in my name in 1991 and 1994. The joinery techniques, they're in the foundation of about 40% of the furniture this company has ever made." He put his face in his hands. "I didn't go to him. I'm not sure that was the right choice, but I was 63 years old and I had just buried my wife and listened to her letter read aloud in an attorney's office, and I needed a moment to just sit still and breathe. After a while I said, 'Come see the workshop sometime, when you're ready. Not to talk about the business or the money or any of that. Just come see where I work. I'll show you what I do.'" He lifted his face from his hands. "Why?" he said. "Because you're my son," I said. "And your mother asked me to leave the door open. So I am." He left without saying much else. I don't know what happened between him and Pamela that night. I don't know where they stand or whether their marriage survived the Friday in Martin Graves's office. It's been several months. He has called me twice. The conversations were short and careful, like two people on a narrow bridge, testing the boards before they put their weight on them. I went back to the workshop the following Monday. The cherry dining table was waiting where I'd left it. I sat down with my hand plane, and I started working the edge joints, and the smell of fresh cherry wood filled that space the way it always has, since before my son was born, since before I knew Barbara, since I was a young man who knew how to make things with his hands and had no idea yet what that would eventually mean. I still don't have everything figured out. I still wake up at 5:30 and reach across the bed for someone who isn't there. I still knock on the inside of the workshop door sometimes before I remember that she's not going to answer. But the business is mine. The patents are mine. The 37 years of work are exactly what they always were. And somewhere in that truth, in the simple, plain, documented fact of what I actually built, I find, most mornings, enough to keep going. Sometimes the only revenge worth having is the one your wife arranges from the other side of the grave.